Alright guys, good morning and welcome once again. In today's video, I want to teach us how to make a simple trouser, and then I also want to lay more emphasis on the measurement areas and the areas of concentration, and then trying to make sure that all of us must have learned or known the areas to pay great attention to avoid errors of your trouser being so tight on your hip, and as well having issues on the closing and on the cutting processes. So right here on the board, I have my trouser areas of measurement, which are the waist, the hip, the laps, the knee, the ankle, and the trouser length. Now these 6 areas are the areas you must measure, and then bear in mind that in measurement, you have to measure in accordance with the person's choice, be it fitted or free. So however your customer wants your trouser to be, then make sure you measure accordingly. Now if you have not watched my video on measurement, try to locate it on the YouTube channel, on the group, or any of my online classes. So right here, this video is going to help us to understand the cutting processes and how to derive a perfect crouch, and then how to know when your measurements are wrong. So I will take my time now to explain all these methods to us, and then we now proceed to the proper marking. Now, first and foremost, the measurement we are going to work with will be a waist of 38, hips of 47, laps of 25, knee of 18.5, ankle of 14, then length of 42. So this will be the measurements we are going to work with, and by the time we get the measurements correctly, now we proceed to marking. Now let me explain to you the similarities or the peculiar thing that is in my measurement. Now for every measurement, the difference between the laps, the waist and the hip must be at least 9 to 10 inches for all grown-ups. Now if you look at the measurement I have on the board, the difference here is 7 plus 2 is 10, right? So you have a 10-inch difference from the waist to the hip. Now you might be asking me if it's not much. Yeah, you might be correct, but then bear in mind that in such outfits and on trousers, all customers will wish to tuck in the 2 hands and possibly have wallets or anything at the back of the trouser, and then those allowances or that aspect will need much allowance for your customer to properly have a nice fitting. Now if you have an issue or an instance whereby the difference of your trouser, the difference here is not up to 7, that's your, after measuring your trouser, you find out that the difference from the waist to hip is not up to 7 inches. You have 2 options. It's either you increase your hip or you check if your waist measurement is wrong. Now in most cases, we all know that in waist measurement it's always a tight fitting, so it's assumed that the waist always must be correct. Now where we have a pending issue is always on the hip aspect. So in such cases, if your measurement difference is not up to 7 or 9 or 10 or 8, there are from 7 upwards, try your best to make sure that you add a value or some certain inch on the hip area to enable you have a nice measurement that will correspond and give the customer ease. Now this trouser I'm trying to explain to us is basically on a belt trouser. Now when you have a rope trouser, you'll be no need to use the waist in marking, right? So having known this now, so the constant value you should have is usually from 7 to 10 inch difference. Now you might have a value that is lesser than this only on kids outfits. What I'm telling you now is for grown-ups, and then if you encounter whereby you're making for kids, now this parameter or this measurement tends to reduce. So on kids you might have it to be 5, 4.5 or 6, right? But then for grown-ups it must be above 7 to 10 inches measurement of difference of the waist to the hip. So having explained that, now the next part I want to explain as well is on the lap. Now you know in the lap measurement, the laps is by 2. So if you divide 25 by 2, you are going to have 12.5, right, for the lap. Now the hip is by 4. 47 by 4, you are going to have 11.75. That's 11.75, right? Now this is the lap measurement and this is the hip measurement. Now in my own mode of cutting, I don't use my lap in cutting my trouser. For this particular trouser, I use my hip. Now bear in mind that when you divide your hip by 4, you are meant to add extra 2 to read back, extra 2. Now when you add extra 2, automatically your lap, your hip measurement plus 2 must be above your lap by 2. That's sorry, your hip measurement by 4 plus 2 must be above your lap measurement divided by 2. So right here we have lap 25 divided by 2 gave us 12 and a half. Agreed. Now the next thing we have is our heap of 47. 47 is 11.3 quarter. Now because 11.5 is 46, so 3 quarter is 47. Yeah. Now when you have your lap heap measurement divided by 4, it gives you 11.75. Now add extra 2 to it, you are going to have 12.75, which can be called 13 inches, right? So automatically your hip measurement is surpassing your lap measurement. Now when you have this value in this form, that means your lap is safe, and then you can go ahead to make use of your hip measurement plus 2 to cut, and then ignoring your lap measurement. Then when it comes to coupling, that is when you will now apply lap measurement by 2. That's 12.5. But whereby you divide your hip by 4, and let me say, assumingly I have a wrong measurement here. Maybe let's say I have a hip of let's say 40 hip. In most cases, I do have issues whereby people ask me hips of 40, what's of 38. Now 40 divided by 4 is 10. 10 plus 2 is 12. Now the lap is more than the hip, which is not meant to be so. So in all cases, make sure that whenever you divide your hips by 4 plus extra 2, the value you will have must be above the measurement of your lap divided by 2. Then bear in mind that in most cases, the least or the worst you can have is to have both the hip by 4 plus 2 being the same measurement with your lap measurement by 2. So in most cases, you might have issues of whereby the lap and the hip are corresponding. Let's say you have a hip, let's say a hip by 4 that gave us 11, for example, and then you have a lap by 2 that gave us 11 as well. So this is the least thing or the highest you can have, but you can never have a place or a point where your lap measurement, these laps, is now being 11 and then your hip by 4 being 10. It's not obtainable. That means that trouser will end up being so tight on your customer. So if you watch this video very well, listen to what I have said, take your time to analyze the information I'm trying to give you, you'll notice that this is actually how best you can correct your error. So as we progress in the question as well, I will as well show you other forms of checking your errors and in your markings. So the next thing you are going to also consider is when you have your laps and your ankle, now make sure that whatever you have on your knee must be in between these two values. Now your knee can never be more than your lap, right? So by the time you connect your lap by 2 to your ankle by 2, your 18.5 must correspond. So I will show us how to cut this trouser now, and then show us as well how to segment our measurements if they are correct. And then in such cases, you counter any error, you can correct them while you are marking. Then after cutting, you start having the issues of lap and hip is not corresponding, and the hip is tight on the customer, and the customer cannot put his hand in the pocket, or he cannot insert his wallet at the back. So these are the areas of concern, which we also know. Then in addition to that as well, another area we are also having a little questions and a little setback is on the crouch. Now the crouch, like I told us, have its own formula. Now for our own formula, then bear in mind that whatever I'm telling you now is peculiar to me. This is how I work. Now I wouldn't like or encourage us or have issues of people comparing this method to other methods. Now my method, I'm not trying to dispute other methods. All methods are correct depending on how you learn and depending on what works for you, right? So now the crouch measurement, they have different forms of crouch measurement, which I will mention. The first method is trying to pass the tape beneath the leg. Second one is the person's length measurement by 4. The next one is having your customer to sit on a bench or chair, measure the waist point to the basement of the chair, and then the last measurement, the last way now is by this formula I'm trying to give us. So the next formula is crouch divided by for your crouch is hips you divide by 4, right? Now this works for everybody, both for adults and for kids. But whereby when you're having measurements for grown-ups, and then any length that is less than 39, you might not have. from whatever answer you get as your crouch. But any length that is bigger than 39, that from 39 upwards, you don't minus half. So for any length less than 39 minus half, more than 39 or from 39 upwards, leave the measurement the answer you get. For example, now let's get crouch measurements for different hip sizes and trouser size. Let's say hips of 44, right? Now let's get a crouch for it. For 44 hip, we have crouch of hips by 4, which is 44 by 4 is 11, right? Now in such person, and if the total length is above, let's say for 39 total length, and then hips of 44, I will use 11 crouch for him. It will work perfectly. That's from 39 upwards, right? Use 11 crouch for him. It will work perfectly. But then, if the hip is 44 and the length is 39, then see what I will do. Let's say so the length is 36 or 37. Let's say 37. Then I will do 44 by 4. Will give me 11, but minus half will give me 10.5. That's 10 and a half. Now, the half inch I have reduced or deducted is going to have is going to go a long way to make sure that the trouser crouch area is not too much or excess for the hip of 44 and length of 37. So this is how you keep on manipulating your measurements to make sure it suits individual customers. Please bear in mind, don't minus more than half an inch from whatever answer you get. Half an inch is the constant. Bear in mind that you also sew across the crouch, and then that sewing will as well shorten or lessen the crouch depth. So these are the areas we have to be informed. Then let's progress to the marking processes.